Hello everyone, welcome to the Housing Element Working Group webinar. We'll begin shortly at 1:02 to allow people to filter in. Thank you for your patience. The webinar will begin now.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jose Armando Jauregui, and I'll be facilitating today's Housing Element Working Group Kickoff. I just want to start off by saying thank you very much for your participation in today's webinar. Really looking forward to discussing the intent of today's webinar, discussing the goals and outcomes of the project itself. I'm really looking forward to collaborating with you all in preparation for the 7th cycle. So for today's agenda, we'll be discussing the background and introduction to the program itself. We'll be discussing the goals and the outcomes, process, and the stakeholders that we connected with and will be connecting with throughout this entire life cycle of the project itself, key topics, and discussing next steps. But before we jump into today's agenda itself, I would like to do a quick poll to see who is in the room for today's webinar. So momentarily, you should be receiving a questionnaire, one question itself asking for you to identify which type of stakeholder are you here with today. We'll leave it open for about 2 minutes or so as folks chime in. All right. Looks like we got a healthy attendance of local governments in today. We have second advocates. Third, we have regional governments. Oh, actually, consultants, then advocates. And then we have regional governments, some developers, and academia here in attendance today. Nonetheless, I just really want to thank you all for your participation again for today's webinar. All right, so just to give a little bit of background of what the 6th cycle looked like for us within HCD specifically, was a little bit chaotic. The 540 jurisdictions that we have here in the state of California, it can be very daunting to work with such a number of jurisdictions when we have our collective team, small but mighty, to work with each of you all here today. The total number of reviews that we received, formal and informally, from the years of 2021, which was the beginning mark for a lot of jurisdictions entering the 6th cycle, all the way to 2025 was 2,153 reviews itself. Of those 2,153 reviews, we actually completed 1,906 formal reviews, leaving about 200 and some change of informal reviews that we provided during that 4-year period itself. With all these number of reviews that we have completed over the past 4 years, not including 2026, we currently have a compliance rate of 95% itself. I just want to take a moment to congratulate those jurisdictions that have achieved the compliance status. And for those jurisdictions that we're actively working to get into compliance, we have the goal of reaching 100% by the end of the year itself. We're hoping that with the technical assistance, collaboration, and partnership between us stakeholders itself, we'll get to the 100% compliance rate by the end of the year. So just to break down what it looked like to have had sent 2,153 review letters over the last 4 years, we did a breakdown of roughly about 372 letters per year or an average about 30 letters per month. But I'll be honest with you, it doesn't really feel like that we send about 30 letters a month. It probably felt like we sent a lot more. And the reason being is that upon the first year of 2021, with the statutory deadlines of when folks are entering the sixth cycle, it is staggered off to help us a little bit, but also to help you all with a little bit more of a buffer within capacity itself. So within the first year of 2021, we sent roughly about 305 letters. But as you can tell, the following year, we almost doubled the number of letters that we sent out, reaching a height of 482 letters in the year 2022. And then the following year, we sent 459 letters out. And then the year 2024, we sent 408 letters out. With this past year, 2025, sending half of the letters that we sent out in the previous years to 206 itself. When I look at these numbers, a few things come to mind is that one, looks like all the folks were in accordance of submitting their housing elements at the same time to our department. But as we continuously worked alongside each other, we were able to start reducing the number of reviews that we were receiving and started to send out more adopted end letters as the years have passed itself. So seeing the number go all the way down to 206 in the last year itself is just a huge accomplishment from both ends of our partnership that we've worked collaboratively over the past few years to get your letters into compliance itself. So one of the questions that I asked myself and the team as well is, how could we ensure that as we're preparing for the seventh cycle, how can we start receiving less number of reviews and start receiving more in compliant elements itself? And one of the strategies that we've really embarked on is a regular process improvement that we initiate each housing element cycle to discuss a few items. The goals that we've established for this housing element working group is to, one, identify the successes and challenges from the sixth cycle itself. I believe there's always room for improvement, and the best way to identify those areas for improvement is looking at what we went through as a whole collectively. There might have been some challenges along the way that I want to highlight as part of our conversations from today's webinar and then future events as well, but also identifying the successes, areas in which folks felt as if these areas should be continued to be supported, not only for the existing period of time, but also for the future as well. Another goal that we have here with the Housing Element Working Group is to evaluate and to improve our business processes, such as how do we receive element reviews, how do we provide feedback to you all, how could we ensure that we're expediting reviews. By taking a look at our tools as well, how are we providing folks feedback through our review matrices, through sample ordinances, sample programs. These types of resources really play a huge role in helping you folks get into compliance faster and make compliance with new mandates that come on a yearly basis itself, and by also reviewing policies that we have as well. The main goal that we have here today for the Housing Element Working Group is to improve our outcomes and have a more facilitated and streamlined review process for the seventh cycle itself. There's been a lot of nuances with sixth cycle now leading into the seventh cycle. I think we have a great opportunity here today to really work together to get to that higher compliance rate at an earlier time frame as we enter the due dates for the seventh cycle. Some strategies that we utilize here to receive some input include internal HCD discussions, surveys, some listening sessions, and lastly, the audit itself. For each of these components, I will be doing a deeper dive in today's webinar to discuss the strategies that we utilize for each of these components here today. So, to do a deeper dive into some of the intended outcomes that we have for the Housing Element Working Group, first one is to reduce the average number of internal review timelines. We are completely aware that a lot of the revisions that you folks are anticipating really depends on how quickly we can turn around and provide feedback to you all itself. Whether it's because of capacity issues, unique situations in some of the elements, or other factors and other responsibilities that we have here in HCD, we really have been working on trying to streamline our review process so we could get back feedback to you all in a timely manner itself. By being able to provide you all with feedback, we will be able to facilitate more revisions within submittal periods that have been submitted on your end itself, and we could get into smaller letters with smaller findings and even possibly leading into draft in compliance letters itself. This leads me to our second outcome, which I had just mentioned aligns with our first outcome, which is increasing the number of compliant second drafts. We are aware that it is very difficult to take an element to council that has not been deemed to meet substantial compliance through our review. And so by working collectively together to ensure that drafts that you are submitting are receiving that draft in compliance approval before taking into adoption for council would really help you all and your process itself. So we're really trying to increase a higher number of those second or subsequent draft review and compliance letters itself. Our third intended outcome of the Housing Element Working Group includes our ability to offer mid-reviews check-ins. We can understand that it may be very nerve-wracking when you submit an element to us and then takes a few weeks to touch base to receive a status update as to where we are with our review, if we have any questions, or if there's any points of clarification that we need itself. So we really want to ensure that moving into the seventh cycle that we're improving our ability to meet with you all sooner, whether that's on a bi-weekly basis or earlier than 30 days that we normally provide folks with itself. We understand that being able to stay in communication throughout the entire review period will not only help ease the nerves on your end, but also will help streamline and facilitate any revisions that we flag upon our preliminary reviews. Our fourth intended outcome is how can we improve our processes, our tools, our resources to lead to streamlined reviews itself. Existing right now on our website is a few items that we have had since the sixth cycle, such as the building blocks, templated ordinances, sample programs, and sample analysis. But as we're leading into the seventh cycle, we really want to revisit all those existing tools and ensure that we're updating with new guidance, new sample analysis and programs, if applicable, new templated ordinances that meets all the new amendments to recent legislation. So that way, as you're working on those revisions for your housing element itself, you have up-to-date resources that you could access and tools to help with your revisions, and not only with your revisions, but also for us internally here as well to complete our reviews in a faster time frame. Another intended goal that we have here for the Housing Element Working Group is to identify practices that can potentially serve as models for the broader and more efficient compliance areas itself. We understand that within each of the local governments, you may not have the opportunity to connect with regional governments or your neighboring jurisdictions to discuss some of the intended outcomes that you both are all planning for itself. And so at the state agency, we have the opportunity of working with every city and county here in California. And at times we identify that some similar programs that are implemented in the Southern California area are also trying to be implemented into the Northern California areas itself. So by utilizing us as a state agency, we're trying to collect sample programs, sample ordinances that we could then share with you all here today to serve as best practice models. And so that way we're not reinventing the wheel, but also collectively working together to highlight best practices and share those amongst those jurisdictions that may feel as if this may be applicable to them here. Another intended outcome here is to increase the understanding among stakeholders with varying viewpoints. At times, we understand that the current legislation may be very difficult to interpret and to even comply with, depending on some of the local barriers and constraints that you have here within your respective jurisdictions. So by spending more time to walk through some of these barriers and constraints and to come up with innovative solutions that don't only address the needs of your jurisdiction, but also meet the requirements of new state law is a huge priority for us today for heroes as well. So we will look forward to, fostering more collaborative conversations to understand where are some areas that we can work together to ensure that policies that are mandated on us can be worked through, and then we have those meeting those new requirements itself. And lastly, is addressing the audit report and implementing the recommendations. And I'll be doing a deeper dive as to what exactly those recommendations are. So what process did we follow to start working on a framework and start collecting feedback from you all here today? The first step in our housing element working group process was facilitating initial internal discussions here. The topics that we discussed were identifying potential process improvements, policy changes, tools, and resources. The second component of our project itself was to facilitate internal outreach and engagement. This included facilitating today's webinar, a public survey that has been sent out via eBlast and is currently on our HCD website. In the event that you did not receive communications from our eBlast, we'll be facilitating some listening sessions the following month, and then we'll also be completing a final report on the recommendations highlighted through each of these components: the webinar, public survey, listening sessions, the audit, and then also amongst internal discussions as well. And then lastly, implementing the audit recommendations. To provide more detail as to kind of what the conversations felt like within the internal process itself, we actually collaborated amongst other units within the Housing Policy Division. This included having conversations with our Housing Element team, our Housing Accountability team, our Data Innovation team, Fair Housing Unit, Accessory Dwelling Units, and our Climate and Transportation team here. The reason why we facilitated a discussion amongst each of these teams here is because they all play a role within the housing element itself. They may not be the direct team that reviews your housing elements, but from some of the staff members working with your jurisdictions, these are some respectable units that you reach out to for technical assistance, inquiries about statuses. You provide data to these teams, or we provide guidance on each of these respective fields of work that they do here. And ultimately, it all contributes to the housing element itself. So a lot of our discussions were focused in on how can we improve our administrative procedures. When you reach out to one of these teams, how could we ensure that communication information provided to the housing accountability team is then shared to the housing element team, and vice versa? How could we ensure that the technical assistance guidance that is available through the fair housing team, the accessory dwelling unit team, even through the housing accountability team, is in alignment with the technical assistance that we provide here with the housing element team? And how could we ensure that the resources that are provided on our climate and transportation team, our data innovation team, our accessory dwelling unit team, how could we ensure that those same resources are available to you as you're working on your housing element itself? And how can we better align the analysis for each of these components within the housing element that aligns with the specialties of each of those units that I had just mentioned above? So ensuring that we're working with our own teams here internally at HCD, we feel as if we can improve and streamline our communications, leading to providing you all with faster revisions within our preliminary reviews, providing you with more resources that not are only available at the housing element side, but also they're the other units within our division. And also, ensuring that if there are specific unique situations that require more technical expertise from some of our other units, that we're aligning you with those individuals to help problem solve any areas of concerns that may be risen within your review period itself. Now for our external process. As you had seen within the survey itself, we kind of previewed, folks that we have been reaching out to throughout this process. Just to kind of reiterate, the folks that we've been looking to work with throughout this entire housing element working group is regional governments, such as councils of governments and metro planning organizations, state departments, advocates, developers, member organizations, local planners, and consultants. I just want to acknowledge that each of you all here within these respective fields play a huge role within the housing element process. You may not be the ones submitting the housing elements, you may not be the ones writing the housing elements, but the information that you could elevate to those that are working on the housing element, whether that's making revisions, identifying sites, looking for local data and knowledge, RENA distribution, permanently furthering fair housing programs that focus in on housing mobility, anti-displacement, place-based strategies. You all actively work together to ensure that the housing element that is submitted to us really captures the local governments that you're representing in here today. So it is really important for us as we worked on, releasing the survey, the listening sessions, our email inbox, and today's webinar, that we've sent out a huge net to catch as much information that we can garner to ensure that as we're working on making these updates ourselves, we are, including each of your comments and adding it to the recommendations that we're currently implementing as we speak. So to discuss, what areas that we're looking to specifically receive some feedback on, includes these 5 topics right here, but is not limited to just these topics itself. As you are aware, the housing element has various components, but the ones that we really wanted to focus in on to garner feedback primarily include public participation, sites inventory and analysis, affirmatively furthering fair housing, governmental constraints, and administrative procedures as well. And so to do a little bit more specifics as to each of these components here, when it comes to the sites inventory and analysis, we're specifically looking to see if there's any methodology options or types that we can be utilized to ensure that the sites that you provide for your 7-cycle regional housing needs allocations are approvable and have the opportunity for realistic development within the planning period itself. So maybe this may include identifying potential safe harbors that we could evaluate for potential development on sites in the inventory, such as your non-vacant sites. How can we develop potential safe harbors that help you address the analysis on your firmly furthering fair housing sites inventory selection? We're also looking for possibly the identification of additional actions that local governments can implement to effectively address and firmly furthering fair housing issues, such as housing mobility, displacement measures, place-based strategies, and other initiatives as well. We also want to discuss on process improvements. How can we provide more technical assistance materials, tools, and resources to better equip you as you prepare for your 7-cycle itself? We understand that there are a lot of new laws that have come into play over the past few years itself, so ensuring that we have available resources to help you understand and interpret these new laws, so then that way we can minimize the number of findings that we have applicable to these new legislations and getting you into compliance at a faster rate. We also want to update our existing guidance documents. We know that from the start of the 6th cycle to now entering the 7th cycle, there has been some amendments to current laws, and so ensuring that our existing guidance, such as the building blocks, is up to date, that not only provides more specific information on existing statutes itself, but then also provides new information and sample guidances on how to comply with new mandates itself. We also want to ensure improve how local governments and stakeholders share communication. At the end of the day, we're all collectively working towards one goal, and we want to ensure that we're all partners here today. So trying to increase that communication between local governments and stakeholders is a huge area that we're looking to improve on. And then internally and externally, the review tools that we facilitate to utilize on our housing element reviews, we want to ensure that we're updating these tools that we have here that we share amongst you all. We want to continue to be as transparent as possible when we provide you with our preliminary review matrices. And so ensuring that if there's any modifications that we can make to those types of tools to help you understand specifically what we're flagging and the recommendations that we want to suggest are readily available and clear for you all to understand itself. Additional improvements that we're looking for as well include, strengthening our public participation throughout the entire housing element development process to identify more effective strategies that include all sectors of your communities itself, and then also can potentially adjust governmental constraints as well. So those are just some components that we've identified here as well, but throughout the entire 6th cycle and through other communications, there have been opportunities for improvements that have been identified by local governments and other stakeholders that are here in attendance here today as well. Some of the feedback that we received from you all include providing earlier notice of revisions during the review period. As I had mentioned earlier, the quicker that we can get you all feedback, the quicker that you're aware of what else needs to be addressed, so then you can ensure that you're working with your respective teams to address those remaining findings and get into a compliant state faster. We also want to ensure that the consistency that we share in our feedback, such as in our letters, and the findings that we provide are an alignment that we highlight in our technical assistance calls. There are times as we're going through review and our preliminary feedback, we highlight, areas that need additional revisions, or we don't capture some areas that need revisions. And then when we send the letter, there's not an alignment between those review matrices and the final letter itself. So ensuring that our team is being more consistent in the feedback is a goal of ours as well. We're also looking to minimize the reviewer turnover. We understand how important it is to have consistency among staff to work with you all throughout the entire life cycle of your element. From the initial draft to subsequent revisions and to the adoption process, having one reviewer really helps on you all and us as well to be consistent and help streamline our reviews. We also want to ensure that we have timely and sufficient guidance on new requirements, such as, for example, the site's inventory, affirming for housing guidance, and other guidances as well, but ensuring that we have these tools available to you earlier on as you're already in preparation for the 7th cycle, rather than having these tools available right before you submit itself. We want to ensure that the guidance that we have is being provided to you all in a timely manner. And then lastly, working on to expedite reviews to meet some of the grant deadlines. Over the past few years, housing element compliance has now been utilized as a threshold for certain grant programs that we administer, but also through other agencies as well. So ensuring that if you are in one of these scenarios that you need us to expedite our reviews, then we're working collectively with you all to prioritize that review and ensuring that we're meeting those deadlines so you can receive access to those funding opportunities. So another item that we're looking to also focus in on here is the audit feedback. So just this past year, our department, specifically the housing element team, went through an audit. I'll be highlighting a few recommendations provided through the audit itself, but if you would like to take a closer look to other key findings and other information provided by the auditor itself, you could access that through the California State Auditor website. And that report was released in January of 2026 that focused in on our HCD's procedures and oversight regarding housing element reviews. Of the entire report, we were given 5 recommendations for implementation in which our team has actively been working on in preparation for the 7th cycle. The first recommendation given to us was to offer scheduled meetings with local governments following the recipient of a findings letter itself. So whether it's an initial draft, subsequent draft, or even an adopted draft, we want to ensure that upon the email that we send to you all with the findings letter itself, we're providing some times of our availability to meet with you all to walk through that letter, answer any questions, and to start establishing an action item plan that we can both agree upon in preparation to address any revisions that might have been highlighted as part of our reviews itself. By meeting continuously with you all, not only prior stages of your submittal, but also during the review period itself, but then post after the submittal itself, will help strengthen our relationships and ensure that we're working collectively together to address any remaining findings, and there's mutual understanding as to the actions that the jurisdiction and us will take in order to get to that in compliance status itself. We also were recommended to use more consistent language in our findings letters to distinguish the requirements, to distinguish between requirements and suggestions. We want to ensure that through our findings letters, we're very detailed and have an understanding of what is the requirement and what are suggestions that we are providing to you all to then meet those requirements itself. So we've been reviewing our internal documents to ensure that the languages that we have our staff utilize meets the marks between requirements and suggestions that we want to provide to you all to address our remaining findings identified in the letters if applicable. We also want to establish timelines that ensure the guidance for new legal requirements before they take into effect. So this is something that our team was already working on, and this is something that the auditor has highlighted. But moving forward, we will ensure that as new guidance is mandated or new laws are mandated, we have guidance available months well in advance, so then that way you folks have the resources to then utilize in preparation for any programs or implementation measures that you need to take to meet those new mandates itself. We also want to provide each local government or group of local governments within a council of government with a proposed timeline that identifies significant milestones, such as an initial draft submittal, when you should be doing a request for proposal, when you should be submitting informal drafts to us, and then also incorporating, timeframes for how long it will take for HCD to review those revisions and provide feedback. With this sensitive timeline, it will vary upon, each of your respective statutory deadline timelines for your sixth cycle itself, but we want to provide a timeline that helps you understand what type of timeline you should be following in preparation for your seventh cycle itself. And then lastly, is completing a comprehensive workforce analysis so we can understand how much more additional capacity we need here at HCD to ensure that we have the resources to then work with you all to get you guys into compliance at a faster rate itself. And as for that, that concludes the process of the housing element group information itself. And I would like to discuss the next steps as we continue to with the implementation process of the housing element working group. First, I just want to highlight that we currently have an active survey available. As I had mentioned earlier, it was sent through an e-blast, or if not, we have it available on our HCD website. We will be closing the survey on the 15th of August. So please make sure that you are submitting your surveys in a timely manner, and then also sharing it with other applicable stakeholders that you believe they want to share some feedback onto our review process itself. The survey is no more than around 12, 10, 15 questions, if I can remember correctly, but we really appreciate the feedback. Not only do we have this survey as an opportunity to provide feedback, we also will be facilitating some listening sessions in the upcoming months. And so these listening sessions will allow us to discuss some of the survey results, ask a bit more tailored questions about, how could we specifically improve on, but also another opportunity for you to elaborate on some recommendations that maybe were highlighted as part of the survey, or other key recommendations that you think will be fruitful for us to listen to and receive in preparation for the seventh cycle as well. Feel free to email the Housing Element Working Group inbox if you are interested. But I do want to make a friendly note that unfortunately we cannot accommodate everyone. So we will be looking to prioritize those folks that are interested within the listening sessions itself. And another means of providing feedback includes submitting comments to our Housing Element Working Group. So although the survey will be completed on the 15th of August, you still will have the opportunity to provide comments and highlight additional items that you would like for our awareness through the Housing Element Working Group as well. So I would just make a friendly reminder to look out for updates on publicly available resources that we have. We're actively working on updating a lot of the guidance that we have on our Housing Element webpage itself. So as those items are finalized, we will be sending out public announcements about those key updates itself. And then lastly, look out for the final recommendations report. Now, if you have any questions about today's webinar, about items that I have flagged, or other items in the terms of next steps, feel free to send an email to the Housing Element Working Group listed there on the screen right there, or to my email itself. I'm really happy to dive into any questions or comments that may have been submitted in today's webinar below with an email response itself. And again, I just really want to say thank you all for your participation here today. It was a lot of information that I shared, but nonetheless, I'm just really proud of the team that I have here today that I'm working alongside to ensure that the seventh cycle is the smoothest it ever will be. And again, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And with that, we conclude today's Housing Element Working Group webinar.
Thank you very much for attending. This webinar has ended.